last night. I will get more into it, but I mean, it was amazing. Second major league ballpark in my lifetime that I've ever been in. Coors Field was amazing. I thought the people were fantastic there. It was beautiful weather, 80 degrees in Denver, Colorado. But at the same time, I mean, when you watch a polarizing star like that in Shohei Ohtani, you watch him in person, it is very different than when you watch him on the regular television screen. And so the guest that I have, one of the the Super Halo Bros, joining us here today to be discussing upon it. And he knows a thing or two when it comes to watching Shohei Ohtani playing in person. It's absolutely immaculate. So joining me here, Jon Frisch. I mean, I'm going to explain this a little longer here up on the show, but when you think of a polarizing star like Shohei Ohtani, I mean, look, this whole Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese thing is just, it's so ridiculous, but it's like, first of all, I got a polarizing star when I know I see one. Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout, Michael Jordan.
Right.
Just can't help but just respect the fact that they are the plateau of what the sport is going to eventually become. And I'm like, so when I watched Shohei Ohtani last night, I mean, the Dodgers beat the Rockies 9-5. I mean, it was a great time being there. My wife and I enjoyed it. But just something about it, like a polarizing star, to have the ability to have everybody just pull out their phone, find the camera, and just hit record. I mean, everybody, the first at bat all the way to the last. I mean, when you experience watching Shohei Ohtani in the past being a part of this Angels organization, I mean, there's nothing like it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know that you're in for a treat every time Shohei steps on the mound, every time he steps up to the plate. Even, non-Angel fans that came with me to those games when Shohei was a part of the club, man, they're there to see him and to see what he's going to do that day. And pretty much 9 times out of 10, he's doing something amazing. And, it's interesting, the point you're making, Jake, about just the fact that he's a polarizing guy, because when he's not on your team, then it's really difficult to watch sometimes him take your team to town and take them to task, if you know what I'm saying. So really it comes down to every moment that he put up with the Angels was special, and it's great to see him having the success that he's having with the Dodgers. There's some people that think that Angel fans will be bitter that he's not in the organization anymore and that he's not a halo and whatnot, but I'm happy to see the guy have success elsewhere, except when he plays against the Angels, because I'm a fan of the Angels at the end of the day, right?
It's kind of funny because, I mean, the fact is like the vibe I got from Shohei was he was never going to leave Los Angeles. I mean, why would you? It's a big money market town. I mean, they love their baseball. And in the end, I just think with what Shohei Ohtani brings, he brings a lot of international money. It's new money that's coming in. So a lot of this, I mean, the promotions, all of it. I mean, Magic Johnson is sitting on fat ones every single night. So it's just like he's doing, but he knows the LA market, which is incredible. So to shifting on, because I know we're getting into the hard-nosed questions, and for somebody who has covered the Angels for a long time, look, I'm watching the Stanley Cup final, okay, and I am very happy for Connor McDavid to finally get there. Right. And what I said on this show is my only wish is I would see Mike Trout eventually in the World Series, because for God's sakes, it feels like they are both identical type players who, like, as domestic stars, they have paved the way for what the sport really is. Now, I know McDavid's Canadian, but at the same time, they've moved the needle of what baseball really is about. I mean, and so, I mean, I just feel bad for Mike Trout because the injuries are starting to plague the Angels organization. I mean, good God, can Artie Moreno just sell this organization already? I want to see better. I mean, when you see this from inside out, I mean, you're thinking how I'm thinking. I got to get Mike Trout in there somehow, some way, right?
Yeah, when it comes to Mike Trout and the Angels and hoping to see him in the playoffs, I can tell you it's not going to happen anytime soon. And it might be, he might be wise beyond his years before he finally gets back to the playoffs and, this team gets to be good enough to make the playoffs again. And you're right. It all comes back to ownership. It all comes back to decision-making from the front office. It all comes back to Artie Moreno. You mentioned Shohei Ohtani and the amount of money he brings in. Artie Moreno said no to that. They can't see past the end of their nose on the front of their face because they don't see. Look, you can debate whether bringing back Ohtani was a good idea or a bad idea. Like, he's only DHing. You don't know the future of his arm and whatnot. But at the same time, if you call yourself a businessman like Artie Moreno, then the money you're leaving on the table if you don't bring him back. The $700 million contract with all the deferred payments and whatnot, that's going to pay for itself by the end of this season, if I'm being honest. But back to Mike Trout. Look, as an Angel fan, I appreciate the loyalty. When he signed the extension in 2019, you felt pretty good about where the team was. They really just needed some pitching. They still had Pujols, who obviously never had the level of success that he had in St. Louis with the Angels, but he was still hitting milestones. They had Ohtani in his second year. Of course, he had the pitching injury that first year he was there. They had Andrelton Simmons, who was playing the best, offensive baseball of his life, in addition to his incredible glove at shortstop. So, Justin Upton wasn't quite washed up yet either. But the merry-go-round of, we have this GM and this manager and this GM and this manager. There's never been a plan, Jake. And it just doesn't seem like there has been a plan until this year, where they kind of fall butt backwards into a plan because they have a losing record right now. And it's, hey, look at the way these young guys are developing. Well, look, my brother and I, who host Locked On Angels and talk about it all season long, we knew that this was not a go for it year. We knew that this was a development year. We wanted to see O'Hoppe and Neto and Shawnuel and Adele and Moniak and the young starting pitchers get their chance to develop over the course of a full season. And we knew that it probably wasn't going to look pretty as they did it. But the fact is that they've never had a plan, and they kind of fell into one this year because the record's not great. And so you hear the dialogue from Ron Washington change from over the offseason of, hey, we're going to run down the West. We're going to be about it. And now all of a sudden it's, well, they're learning and growing and they're developing. And so the company line has changed. And we all kind of knew that coming into this season. But for some reason, the front office just wants to make sure that they dangle that carrot in front of Angels fans and say, well, don't go anywhere. We still want you here. We're going to win. We promise. But we know as long as Artie Moreno's in charge, they're not going to have a winning team out there. They might accidentally field a winning team if these young guys continue to grow. But at the end of the day, when it comes to Mike Trout, I appreciate his loyalty. If he sticks it out the rest of his contract, there will be some winning seasons in store for Mike Trout. Might not be prime Mike Trout, might not be the Trout that redefined the game of baseball, but I think there will be winning seasons ahead for him if he sticks with his team and the young guys continue to grow.
Yeah, and this is the one thing, because it so pains me every time to just basically say this, because again, I've grown up a baseball guy my entire life. And so, but when I see an organization that I just get confused, what are they doing?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the plan is in place. The thing of it was, and to go upon this with the veterans, because the Angels have had a track list now, I would say, for about close to, 12 years at least. You had the Pujols contract, you had the Josh Hamilton contract, the CJ Wilson contract, and then all of a sudden they started getting all of these other veterans. I mean, 2014, they did make a serious postseason run, but it wasn't enough to really cap off against the Kansas City Royals. So then, to go upon with this subject, Anthony Rendon, who won a World Series in 2019 with the Washington Nationals, signs a massive contract with the Angels, and this just has not panned out. He's been on the news, he's been fighting with fans, and then at the same time, do I even have a care in the world at all to basically play baseball? Because look, it's one thing if it's just a recreational sport for all of us, But when it's your job and it's your duty, look, I'm not going to tell my boss, hey, I'm just going to give you 60% today. No, right. I need 110%. Where are you right now with this contract with Anthony Rendon?
Look, it's Artie Moreno's own money, and it's his own fault because they've never signed a player of that level out of necessity. It's always been the star player that just came off of a great offensive season. And look, at the time, yeah, the Angels needed a third baseman, and Anthony Rendon was a good signing for them. But the fact is, you had Garrett Cole out there who ended up with the Yanks. There was a fan of ours who mentioned a story about Billy Epler flying out to meet with Zach Wheeler, and he was told, no, turn around and come home. We're going to meet with Anthony Rendon. Can you imagine Zach Wheeler in that starting rotation for the same contract he's got with the Phils right now? Would have made a huge difference with this Angels organization. Of course, with our luck, he probably would have had Tommy John and probably would have had some elbow issues. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, the fact is that Zach Wheeler, Garrett Cole, those are the names that the Angels have needed over the years. Yeah. You end up with your Hamiltons and your Pujolses, and I guess I'll fight people on CJ Wilson. He's not as bad as everybody kind of lumps him in with that Pujols contract. But yeah. I think, you know what, at the time they needed starting pitching and he was the best one. And that to me is a good signing because it was out of an area of need. But then you think about the fact that they had Greinke in 2012 and they brought in Hamilton rather than putting that money towards Greinke, or maybe bringing back Torrey Hunter, a guy who was really loyal to the Angels. And he's now part of the system as an assistant to the GM, which is great. But all that to say, going back to Anthony Rendon, the Angels needed a third baseman like that. But the idea that he's not played nearly enough games, he's not nearly worth his contract. He's got the nonchalant attitude. It turns off a lot of fans. Look, we had a lot of sympathy for him on our show the first few times that he got injured. And last year, he didn't really do himself any favors with some of the comments that he made. This year, it does seem like he's been trying really hard. I think it took somebody like Ron Washington to kind of snap him back into reality and fix some of those attitude issues, because I think last year with Phil Nevin in charge, the whole clubhouse was kind of a zoo. It was Nevin's first year as a major league manager, full-time major league manager, not an interim. And all that to say, he was playing some good ball. I know he got off to a really bad start, but he was playing some good ball before he went on the injured list. Was it $38 million ball? No, absolutely not. And I don't think we'll ever get $38 million worth of good baseball out of Anthony Rendon. And so the Angels are just going to have to ride out that contract. And I think that's part of the hesitation why the Angels haven't signed big name contracts. But again, it goes back to the way Artie likes his superstars, and pitchers don't play every game, and pitchers don't sell tickets the way a Mike Trout or a Shohei or a Pujols or a Rendon might sell tickets. So at the end of the day, it was a signing that, yeah, you could argue they needed a third baseman, but there were more pressing needs at the time, and now it's kind of come back to bite them.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, I feel like the Artie Moreno effect with, him being so hitter friendly, all the other teams from the outside looking in are like, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I'll just take your relief pitcher, and then I'll beef up my bullpen because I'm going for a World Series run. So, right. But I just think, watching Ron Washington, because ultimately we have not had a more pivotal manager than when we had Mike Scioscia. I mean, when I watched the guy manage, the guy was great. He was what Angel baseball was meant to be. And at the time when 2002 happened, I mean, against a great Giants team, I mean, it just kind of set the tone. It changed everything. Yeah. So now you fast forward. I mean, the Joe Madden, they tried this idea. It did not work out for the best. I felt like his time was already kind of up by the time he was out of Chicago. And respectfully, we still respect him. But now you look at Ron Washington, and I loved him in Texas, and I loved him everywhere that he's been. But do you think this is ultimately bringing in a guy like that? I've watched his interviews, and I think he's great. But does the organization themselves, are they patient enough that they want to see this thing develop? They want to get better at this. Is he going to be around here for the long run?
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, we've loved him everywhere he's been, and players have loved him everywhere he's been. You look at what he was able to do for Marcus Semien and turn him into, a Gold Glove caliber up the middle infield guy versus who he used to be. You still see Freddie Freeman with the Dodgers doing the Washington drills before each game. And so he has a lasting impact everywhere that he's been. And I think that that's the main reason why he was brought in, is because there's no better guy right now to be around the young core of the Netos and the Ohapis than Ron Washington, because he's going to have a lasting impact on their careers. Now, is he the best manager, game manager, decision maker? Not always. No, I don't think that he's, and even going back to the World Series in Texas and not making that substitution, with out in right field, where it could have been a much different ending to the Cardinals Rangers game. But look, this is the way I see it, Jake, is before the season even got started, I had a feeling of, is Artie Moreno quiet quitting, right? In that sense that his team president, the guy who has turned this team into a marketing machine rather than a baseball team, John Carpino, his contract's up at the end of the year. Perry Manassian's contract is up at the end of the year. Ron Washington has a 2-year deal with the possibility of a third, but giving Ron Washington a 1-year deal is insulting. So 2 is the best you can do. So there's a lot of expiring contracts. There's a lot of key decision makers who might not be in the organization next year. And so, yeah, you're right. I wish I could answer that question. The big decision here is the front office going to let Perry Manassian, for all his flaws and for all the things that he has done well, are they going to let him stick around after this year because his contract's up? Are they going to be patient with Ron Washington enough to see this young core develop, or are they going to have a second losing season next year and say, well, he's been no good? Because it took a few years for him in Texas to turn it around. And so you kind of wonder who's going to bat for Ron Washington. And this year was special because Perry Manassian, for the first time, actually got to pick his manager. You mentioned Joe Maddon. He was here before Perry Manassian. Perry Manassian didn't pick a manager because once Joe was dismissed, Phil Nevin filled that role. They kept Phil Nevin around because there were the sell the team rumors were happening, and Artie and family put that statement out there. And so they didn't pick a manager because they're like, well, maybe a new regime will want to pick their own. And so he was kind of a holdover. So for Perry to pick his manager for this season, I think picking Ron Washington was the right move. Perry has not been great on the free agent market throughout his tenure, but at the same time, I think from taking the Angels from 0 to something in the minor league system, I think that Perry deserves that credit. And, he's not been the best GM in the world, but the previous GMs didn't do much for our minor league system. And so I'm looking forward to the development coming out of there. But I don't know if the Angels front office has enough patience to see this through. I don't know if Perry Manassian has been able to convince Artie Moreno that this is the right pathway forward, because it's the only thing they haven't done yet is try to develop a young core. It's been years since they've developed their own young core. And you could say probably going back to the early 2000s before Artie got here, and they had the young core that won the World Series. So at the end of the day, it remains to be seen if the front office and ownership will have the patience to let Ron Washington do his job, and if Perry Manassian sticks around next year to see that job through.
Yeah, and especially with right now with what we've got. I mean, the youth movement with Joe Adell and Logan O'Hoppe and a lot of other, and Taylor Ward, a bunch of other young kids right now that are developing in this roster. But as we have the College World Series currently going on, and I know that the MLB player draft is going to be another important thing. I've been screaming this for years as much as you have. We've got to develop pitching. They got to develop a starting rotation, because the farm system right now just doesn't seem to be so strong right now in the pitching department. So when you think of arms as far as for some prospects, are there any that you kind of have you looked at that you kind of have more insight to, like, we got to get this guy because we need to start moving that needle right now? Because, I mean, I watched a time when I can't even believe that, the Angels held on to Jared Weaver for so long and couldn't address the starting rotation. So could this be now the needle they move?
Yeah, I think it has to be. And in particular, with some of the players they have in the system, there's some guys in there that I am looking forward to. Caden Dana comes to mind. He is down in Double-A right now, having a great year. We got some good looks at him in spring training. I am not in any rush to see him come up and be part of this rotation, because that's what the old Angels would do. And that's what the Angels of the last couple of years would do. And so there's no reason or urgency to rush his development and bring him up. I am looking forward to seeing him once he gets there. But the fact is that the Angels, what did I do the other day? I went through for one of our shows on Locked On Angels and checked in on the all pitcher draft. And I would say that about 10 out of those 20 picks were viable major league arms, or at least showing progress toward that. Now, the Angels did get rid of 2 of them last year when they traded to Colorado and they traded to the White Sox. They, of course, traded Kai Bush, who is tearing it up for the White Sox Double-A right now, is somebody who the Angels could certainly have used if they hadn't gotten rid of him last year for that Giolito Lopez trade. But I digress. The fact is if you look at the upcoming draft, I think they're actually in a position where they have 4 top 100 picks, and they are in a position where I can't really think of a good position player other than maybe like Nelson Rada, who is still very young, that is like the next big thing. And so if they get somebody who's going to be, an anchor at third base for the next so many years, I think that that's a great decision. I know Nolan Shawnuel is their first baseman, but he's not really I say this tongue in cheek, he's not really the power guy. However, his power numbers have been better than his on-base numbers this year, which is ironic. But I think there's always room in this organization for good pitching. And the fact that they have 4 top 100 picks this year, I think it's going to be the difference maker. And it's also going to be interesting to see how Perry Minasian and his team handle it, because they're not picking out of, hey, we got to get Ohtani to the playoffs. We need the most ready guy right now. We need to bring this guy up like we did with Neto or like we did with Shawnuel so that we can get to the playoffs. They don't have to do that this year. They can be patient with their picks. They can be patient with the guys that they're going to get and let them cook down in the minor leagues and be wise with the top 4 100 picks that they have.
Yeah, man. I'll tell you what, though. I mean, I think I just heard an entire book put together. It's called The Book of Optimism, which is what Artie Moreno really needs to read up, because right. I mean, to have the hope and optimism with, the Angels is one that I've always hoped for all Angel fans, because it really needs to start moving, and so I'm excited for a lot of these youngsters. I think we're getting a lot of really good guys growing organically in this system, and hopefully when everything is collectively put together. I mean, we just watched the NBA Finals and the Celtics win it, and when everything goes collectively right with with an organization, you just see it just become this big moment. Like it was meant to be that. So that's what I'm waiting for the Angels at some point. But I'm really excited, and hopefully we do see the Angels become better than being the shell of what they've been now in the last 20 years. So hopefully we see that, and hopefully, some greater things are up and on the horizon. But John, appreciate you taking the time, man. Where can everybody get locked on and show off their halos for the LA Angels?
Let's go. Yeah, you can find myself at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. You can also follow the show at Locked On Angels on Twitter. And of course, you can find the show on YouTube. You can find it on Amazon Fire TV. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, of course, on the audio side. So Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff. Just search Locked On Angels, and my brother Mike and I will be there for you, talking Angels baseball 5 days a week. And we put out our shows so that, if you're headed to work early in the morning, we're there for you. So we'll join you for your early morning drive or your cup of coffee, and we'll be glad to have you jump into the show with us. That'd be great.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And then, like I said, I mean, I watched Shohei Ohtani last night. I thought it was fantastic. I've yet to see Mike Trout up in person, and I've heard a lot of great things about Angels Ballpark. So that's on my radar, in my bucket list. So I am waiting to see what it's going to be like watching him play in the Big A. But appreciate you, man. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you later on the flip side.
Sounds good, Jake. And when you're out here at the Big A, hit me up and we'll go catch that game together.
You got it, man. You got it. Absolutely love it. But like I said, I mean, baseball is just, it's fantastic. But again, when you watch